Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. I think we can tell from the dark mornings that just seem to have crashed in and the damp yellowing leaves falling from the trees that autumn is here. It's certainly feeling colder in our house. And I can think of nothing nicer than cupping my hands around a nice warming, perhaps global warming, Think House webinar. Yes, we're still presenting to you online and not in person. Our audience polls continue to show that majority of you are finding the webinar format convenient, time efficient, safe and flexible. Our webinars are also recorded and downloadable, and so can be accessed via our website. In addition, it also means that as an organization, we're not creating a reason for ourselves or any of you to add to our respective carbon footprints. We will continue to reflect on whether, when and how the warmth of human company outweighs these priorities. In this autumn series, we have already considered changes in the competition law environment. And this afternoon, we're putting a commercial lawyer and a litigator in the ring together to fight it out for bragging rights on good drafting and legal solutions. This webinar's topic is the UN's upcoming International Climate Change Summit, COP26, which comes to September this November, and what this means for business and the council that need to advise them. Some housekeeping first. We expect this session to last about 45 minutes, and it will be in a curated Q&A format. If you have any questions, please send them in by using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Depending on the number and content, I will weave them in live or at the end. And if we run out of time, we will ensure that every unasked question gets a written answer. As I have said, the webinar is being recorded, and we will share the link with everyone after the event if you want to review it or pass it around your colleagues. As always, we will be asking for your valuable feedback on how we do. So come November, more than 190 world leaders, along with an entourage of tens of thousands of negotiators, government representatives, businesses and citizens, will descend on Glasgow with the aim of reaching agreement on how to tackle climate change across the globe. This will be the biggest climate event since COP21 in Paris 6 years ago. And a number of wide-ranging topics will be negotiated. There will be something for everyone. Genuine concern and changing electorate priorities mean that many leaders are keen to stress the importance of these debates. Our own Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has said as host, and I quote, that securing a brighter future for our children and future generations requires countries to take urgent action at home and abroad to turn the tide on climate change. It is with ambition, courage and collaboration as we approach the crucial COP26 summit in the UK that we can seize this moment together so we can recover cleaner, rebuild greener and restore our planet. Failure to address the issue of climate change and caring for the planet will have catastrophic consequences for our civilization. News headlines give us pictures of rising seawaters, polluted oceans, desertification, poor soil quality, and mass extinctions. But hope springs eternal in the human breast. Environmental awareness has never been so high. And whilst we have to adapt to some irreversible effects, there seems to be a will across the globe to change tack. Ben Stansfield, you are one of our partners specializing in environmental issues. Not only do you advise clients on environmental risk and liabilities and the increasing environmental compliance agenda, you also keep our own business, don't you, on the straight and narrow in this space. Can we please, if I may, start with some basics? I spent ages wondering why COP26 was actually in 2021. So can you help me? What is COP26 and what does COP actually mean?
Yeah, well, morning everyone. So, well, I guess, you know, COP gives us the opportunity to make lots of bad puns when lawyers are writing client briefings. And after COP26, we may well see headlines talking about COP out, or during the session, you know, tune in, turn on, COP out, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, but it as you said, Michael, it's an international climate summit. going to be held in Glasgow in the first 2 weeks in November, and it's under the banner of the United Nations. The UK is president of COP26, so we've done most of the organisation, and actually we're co-hosting with Italy, which for my sins I only sort of put two and two together a couple of weeks ago. So the Italians are involved, and there's currently a pre-COP session over the next few days in Milan. As you said, we're 190 countries expected to attend. I understand the Australian Prime Minister is still working out whether he's going to come. But I think most world leaders will turn up, for the set pieces at the beginning and possibly at the end. COVID, I guess, will reduce some of those numbers, but I still think we're looking at tens of thousands of delegates. As to why it's called COP, so the governments that are attending, they signed the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, so the UNFCCC. That was back in 1994. And this is the 26th conference of the parties, COP.
Bish bash bosh, I've worked it out now. Thank you very much. So is it really a big deal, or is it a political sideshow? What will really happen at COP26?
It really is a big deal. It was due to happen last year, but it got cancelled because of the pandemic. And I think, for many of us greenies, that's really sort of heightened the anticipation. It's something we've been talking about for quite some time, been looking forward to it. Would the government and, would we environmentalists like to have more buzz, more headlines by now? I think we probably would. I suppose I'm surprised that it hasn't yet sort of really hit the media cycle yet. I guess, well, I'm sure Brexit and COVID have diluted the impact, and no doubt the current petrol crisis is the current focus. But buzz has started. Greta Thunberg hit the news the other day at a pre-COP event for young folk. She said that all global leaders say the same thing. So she said, "Build back better," blah blah blah, and that was the story. So hopefully, Greta has fired the starting gun for it. Is it going to be a big COP? These COP, these conferences of the parties happen every year, but the last really big COP was in Paris, COP21. I think that was 2015, yes, because last year was cancelled. And you'll remember that, one of the big issues of Donald Trump's presidency in the States was, will he ratify the Paris Agreement? So the Paris Agreement sort of has become seared on our brains. It's a really big deal. And COP26 will be on that same scale. We'll almost certainly be talking about the Glasgow Agreement or the Glasgow Accords in years to come. So why is it a big COP? Well, the Paris Agreement said that nations had to do a number of things. First of all, they had to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases produced and increase renewable energy, so increase wind, solar, wave. Really importantly, the Paris Agreement said you've got to keep global temperature increase well below 2 degrees and try to limit it to 1.5 degrees against pre-industrial levels. And that's sort of that's the target, that's the goal. And we might come on to it a bit later, but certainly one of the themes of COP26 will be to limit to 1.5 degrees. We don't talk about 2 degrees anymore, it's 1.5. The Paris Agreement also said that parties had to review progress every 5 years. So this is that 5th year. It's the 5th COP. So that's why it's going to be a big thing. And then finally, COP21 Paris said that governments around the world had to spend $100 billion a year in climate finance to help poorer countries by 2020, with a commitment for further finance in future. I think we're struggling as a global community there. I think we're up to about 80 billion. So there is more to be done. And since Paris, the countries around the world have prepared what's called NDCs. They're nationally determined contributions. And in other words, that's a plan that sets out how they're going to cut carbon and make their contribution to cutting emissions. So there are 191 signatories to Paris, but yet we have 192 NDCs which have been submitted. So Eritrea submitted their NDC, notwithstanding they weren't party to Paris, so haven't ratified it. And what's important here is that the UN published what they call a synthesis report. That was published last week, or maybe the week before, 17th of September. So the UNFCCC published the synthesis report, and that's going to be a huge topic of conversation at Glasgow. So in that report, I mean, it's a pretty dense read, but essentially they're saying we're expecting peak emissions just before 2030 if we continue this trajectory. That's going to be 16% higher, the emissions, in 2030 than in 2010. So we're still going up. Now, if we are to get to a 2-degree increase, we need emissions in 2030 to be 25% lower than 2010. So quite a drop, and get to net zero by 2070. If we want to hit 1.5 degrees, and I'll tell you why this is important in a minute, we need emissions to be 45% lower in 2030 than in 2010, and we need to get to net zero by 2050. So essentially, the UNFCCC concluded there is an urgent need for a significant increase in the level of ambition in those nationally determined contributions between now and 2030. It's the decade of action. So in Glasgow, there's going to be some real arm twisting and saying, look, you know, it's a bit like when you've done your chemistry homework, not bad, you've got to try a lot harder if you want to do well in your exams. So what does 2 degrees increase in average temperature mean? Well, it means that our coral reefs are going to be destroyed. It means the Arctic ice is going to melt once every 10 years, which is going to be catastrophic for wildlife. It means that sea level rises of a couple of meters, several meters, are likely. And you know, bear in mind, 60% of the world's population lives within 100 kilometers of the coast. So when those sea levels go up, that's catastrophic. You know, 1.5 degrees isn't pleasant. We're going to be still looking at food and water shortages. We're going to be looking at migration, as you said, desertification, species extinction, extreme heat events, forest fires, storms. It's going to be grim, but let's not make it as bad as it really could be. So COP26 is a big deal. Yeah, John Kerry, who's the US climate envoy, says, you know, it is the last best chance to avert environmental disaster. We are going to get some, you know, really, hopefully, some really powerful messages from global leaders. I'm fairly sure the Prime Minister will be there, waving the flag of the UK and making some bold statements too. So yeah, it's exciting. It is a really big deal.
So with this focus on asking individual countries just to take on a bigger role for themselves, what has the UK been doing in the run up to COP26? To what extent have we got our own environmental house in order? Are we a good role model?
We are. You know, much as it pains me to sort of be proud of the UK at the moment, we've done a really good job. A couple of years ago, you know, one of Theresa May's final acts was to legislate for net zero by 2050. We were the first country in the world to do that. That's a source of pride. We declared, I think in the same week, Westminster declared a climate emergency after a result of a Labour Party motion. So on both sides of the House, we get it, which is grand. Lots of headlines around the world when we did that. I guess after that, not much happened, and that was a little bit frustrating. We had some really good set piece speeches being made. We had a white paper, but there weren't really answers. So no real blueprints or green prints about how we're going to get there. And you know, we looked over to the EU and we saw that they had produced their roadmap for their Green Deal. And so, you know, when we're speaking to clients, we sort of say, well, this is how we think it's going to go, but we're not quite sure what the exact policy detail will be. But what they're doing in other countries, what they're doing in the EU is X, Y, and Z. And so you get a pretty good understanding of where things are likely to go. Some really good reports from the Committee on Climate Change too. So, you know, we were busy, and I get that. And you know, Brexit was all-consuming for politicians. We had the pandemic, so it's entirely understandable that our eyes have been taken off the green ball a little bit. But you know, COP26 is a great opportunity to get things moving again. I suppose I would say, if I was being a little bit mean, that you know, in terms of green announcements this year, it's been a bit quiet. So whether that means we're going to get some, you know, big announcements in the autumn around COP26, that's probably likely. What are we hoping for? So the Environment Bill was introduced to Parliament in 2019. So it's been around a long time. It's really made slow progress. I really hope that will get royal assent this autumn. And that's really important because in there some really good stuff about air quality and water, some fabulous stuff about biodiversity net gain, which says that all new developments, developers must increase biodiversity as a result of their development by 10%, a minimum of 10%. So that's grand. We're going to get a new environmental regulator, the Office of Environmental Protection. There's really exciting stuff in there that I think we do need. I'm fairly certain, I'm surprised we haven't had it yet, but I'm fairly certain in the next few weeks around COP, we will have a net zero roadmap. We've been waiting that, I'd say, for a while, and that's going to tell us how the UK, what the route to the new green economy is going to look like. I suppose the excitable environmentalist in me is hoping for even more, whether it comes from the Prime Minister or whether it comes, from others in the developed world. So, are we going to get things like minimum renewable energy mandate? So, all energy must come from renewables by this date. Some countries are doing that. So, might we? There's some exciting stuff, I guess, that could happen around agriculture. Proper pricing of meat and dairy to reflect its environmental impacts. We could do so much more globally with that land. Instead of growing crops for livestock, we could grow crops for the hungry. That would be pretty cool. We could rewild nature. We could use that for capturing carbon and keeping it in the soil bridge instead of releasing carbon when we plough. We could look at carbon pricing with greater vigor. We could introduce new sectors. So the EU are talking about bringing commercial property into carbon trading. That might be something that gets looked at more closely. As I say, we could do enhanced carbon capture sequestration. Coal closures is going to be a big one for COP. Obviously, the UK has gone without coal-fired generation for some time, but in this, in recent memory in this cycle, we've turned our coal-fired power stations back on, which is it was necessary. We had to do it, but that was a shame. So, coal, I think, might be something that we perhaps be a little bit bolder on.
Okay, I mean, I'm glad you mentioned puns because there are plenty around, and of course, we need to determine whether this is going to be a good cop or a bad cop, if I can put it that way. See what I did there? But I do understand whether the COP does actually address different themes each year, and it tries to make itself current and keep up with scientific advancements and political debate. So, what are going to be the main themes, do you think, this year?
So COP26, under the presidency of the UK, Alok Sharma has taken the reins, and there are four goals that have been set, and I'll tell you what they are, and then sort of go into a bit more detail. So the first goal is securing global net zero by mid-century. Slightly frustrating they've not said 2050. Mid-century, I guess, is 2050, but for some it could come 5 years sooner, 5 years later. So they're being a little bit vague there, and keeping 1.5 degrees within reach. That's really important. That's goal one. Second goal is adaptation, so to protect communities and natural habitats. Goal 3, really important one, mobilize finance, and I suspect even though it's goal 3, it will actually be sort of pushed higher. And the fourth one's a bit woolly. It's about working together and collaborating and all that kind of good stuff. So how's that going to be achieved? Well, okay, first goal, net zero by mid-century. Countries are going to, obviously they've submitted their NDCs, but the Paris Agreement the targets weren't as ambitious as they could have been, and there have been some reports, admittedly, I would say a year, 18 months old now, which say actually we're probably on course for more like 3 degrees unless we sharpen our pencil a little bit. So yeah, ambitious targets for 2030 are being asked for. It's not like revising for an exam where ideally you should be doing a little bit every night. My daughter's she's year 11, she's got her GCSEs next summer. We were told she must be doing 45 minutes revision a night. Now, back in my day, you just worked all night before an exam and you crammed and you did it that way. And carbon and the environment's not like that. You can't just cram in 2049. We've got to be taking steps now if we're to hit those goals. So COP26 has said, look, we've got to accelerate the phase out of coal. We've got to curtail deforestation. No talk about reforestation, just stopping deforestation. we've got to speed up the switch to electric vehicles, and we've got to encourage investment in renewables. So, yeah, really good stuff in there, but nothing sort of that we might not have predicted. The second goal, so that's adaptation, so protecting communities and natural habitats. This one's a really important one for me, actually, because there is such a focus right now on decarbonisation. We talk about carbon, we talk about emissions, we talk about greenhouse gases. And if you look at the Prime Minister's, he published a paper last year, I think it's the 10-point plan for a green industrial revolution to create 250,000 jobs. That was published last year. And it's all about, and I get it, it's all about building or creating 21st century versions of what we needed in the 19th and 20th century. So, you know, clean power and new infrastructure. Only one of those plans was about sort of improving the environment. It was about making national parks bigger and areas of natural beauty and what have you. So improving natural habitats, rewilding, reforestation, protecting and restoration of ecosystems is really important. And I kind of feel that that's been the poor cousin for the environment for a long time. And I'm hoping that COP26 again really gets that going. But within that category, within that goal, we've also got building flood defences, making ourselves more resilient, greater warning systems, looking at agriculture, how we can avoid loss, damage to homes, livestock, and lives as well. So that's sort of adaptation and habitats. Third aim is about finance. You know, this isn't going to be cheap, right? You know, this is going to be really expensive. So the UN's wanting to mobilise finance, and what it's saying is, look, developed countries have got to make good on their promise to mobilise at least 100 billion of climate finance per year, and that will unlock trillions of dollars from the private sector, so investors, pension funds, lenders, all this kind of stuff. So a real focus on making international financial institutions to play their part, work together to sort of unleash these trillions of finances. And Mark Carney, you know, remember him, our former Bank of England governor. He was very good when he was at the Bank of England about, you know, he got climate, he got the risk to institutions and to economies. So he's advising the Prime Minister on these mechanisms. And you know, all of our large lenders, investors, funders, they get it. You know, it feels to me like that's pushing an open door. Obviously, lots to do, but it's positive stuff. Working together, that's the fourth goal. Yeah, it's a little bit wishy-washy, but you know, COP26 tells us that we can only get there if we work together. So you know, we need to accelerate action to tackle this climate change crisis by greater collaboration between government, between businesses and society. So I think that's fairly predictable, but you know, clearly important.
My first observation about all that stuff is it's all very important, but it all sounds pretty high level. It all sounds at the governmental level. It all sounds like global action, pulling together, all that kind of stuff. Why is this of interest to individual clients, whatever their size?
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. You know, I think it is a UN summit. It's going to be attended by the globe's leaders and NGOs. You know, it has to be at a high level, but that will filter down. But you know, big businesses will be there. You know, there'll be admittedly the large international conglomerates, financiers, the investors, but they're all really keen to play their part in shaping this green economy. And I think, yeah, as I say, COVID will probably impact numbers, but I still think we're going to see a lot of business folk at the summit. So why is business taking part? Well, I guess they want a green halo effect. You know, Gordon Gekko told us in the 80s that greed is bad, and Boris is telling us in the 2020s that green is good. You know, stakeholders really care about that, and that's a theme I've probably talked about in previous webinars. But you know, your lenders, your customers, your employees, all this kind of stuff. And I really don't like putting people in sort of categories, but you know, if you speak to millennials, you know, the younger generations, they really care about environment. And in 10, 15 years time, they're our leaders, they're our customers. You know, the green pound is really important. So, you know, we sort of say to clients is, you know, if you want to know how you're performing as a business, go and ask your grads. They'll tell you. They want to work for green, sustainable businesses who are doing the right thing. So, don't sort of ask me about how Gowling's doing. Speak to the crowd, see what they think. So yeah, becoming an employer of choice and what have you. So I think that's a big driver for businesses in taking part in COP. COP26 is ultimately going to shape consumer behaviour, or rather the outcomes of it will. So, again, research tells us that green products command a premium. Green businesses are super hot right now. There was some reports recently about plant-based businesses, or vegan cosmetics and stuff, being worth 50 billion as an industry in a few years' time. It's just rocketing. A lot of businesses, are rightly alive to that. They want to take people with them. They want to shape their market. COP26 sets a sort of global policy that then filters down to national government policy that then gets translated into regulation. And businesses either comply with regulation or they litigate it. And so again, business is there to understand what regulation is going to look like in a few years' time. They're understanding the direction of travel. Why wait 2 years for the regulation in relation to renewable use or low carbon materials? Just do it now. So I think there's a lot of that in there, and that's why they're wanting to go along. So yeah, it gives us the opportunity to see around corners, to see what's coming up, and I think that's quite important in house council. Without private finance, without funders, without business, this just doesn't fly. Green finance, as we've seen, is a key goal for COP26, and it's going to turbocharge green finance. So again, I think, and I guess because we'll come back to your introduction, Michael, that every business in every sector, in every jurisdiction has an environmental impact. So change is going to come for us all.
Thank you, Ben. Climate change is obviously a risk. Of course, you've made that abundantly clear, and perhaps not a risk, but almost a certainty. So, but what are the opportunities here? I mean, is it all doom and gloom, or are there reasons to be optimistic? And in this context, we've had a question come in from Tony, who's asking about the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the extent to which they play a role in helping us avoid climate change getting beyond the point of no return.
Yeah, so yes, climate change is a risk. It's scary. It's it's horrible, and it's going to be pretty unpleasant for lots of folk. And so I don't want to say it's I don't want to sort of belittle that and say, look, it's fine, it's going to be okay. But yes, you're right. There's an opportunity, and Boris will talk about his green industrial revolution, and I think that is a good way to think about it. And it's the speed of change is going to be quite phenomenal. It's quite exciting. I've been an environmental lawyer for 20 years, and it's been okay. But it's only now that my daughter thinks that what I do is quite cool. So it's a good time to be alive. It's a good time to be involved in this. Because the last industrial revolution lasted 100 years. Ours is going to have to be 10 years. It's going to be phase one, and then the next 20 years will take it to 2050. So it's going to be a really condensed period. There's a lot to do. So we're currently at 40 to 45% carbon cuts, I guess, in the UK, maybe a little bit higher. We're going to have to get to, I think, government wants us to get to 78% cuts by 2035. So phenomenal pace of change, really exciting. And if the UK gets there quicker than others, we've got technology, we've got skills that we can export, we can help, and it's our duty to help developing countries to do the same. So it's potentially really good for business. What are the opportunities? Well, I guess we've got, even in the UK, we get a third of our power generally from wind, a third is from imports, from nuclear, from solar, biomass, and things like that. But we still get 1/3 of our power from gas. So although the power sector has done phenomenal things since 1990 in terms of decarbonisation, we've got a lot more to do. That needs replacing, and we need to go really big on the storage, whether that's going to be batteries, whether it's going to be compressed air, and so forth. In the UK, we're banning the sales of new petrol and diesel cars from 2030, which is last few weeks will speed that up in terms of the petrol crisis, the fuel crisis. But that's a massive change, not just for the manufacturers, but for all the associated infrastructure, right? The charging networks are going to have to be phenomenal. So again, there's opportunities there. COP26 aims to reduce deforestation. I don't think they've been bold enough, and really do hope someone starts talking about reforestation, rewilding, making the world better. We're going to have biodiversity net gain in this country. That's going to spark new industries, new business models. That's exciting. Aviation, shipping, freight. Again, they're all going to have to eliminate, reduce emissions. So we're going to need new tech solutions. Decarbonising our homes. That's going to be a really big opportunity. Homes and offices or commercial properties responsible for 30-40% of our carbon emissions, I guess, as a country. 80% of the buildings you see around us today are going to be here in 2050. So these are the buildings we're going to have to deal with and get to net zero by 2050. Lots of retrofitting. Totally have to rethink the way we heat and the way we cool our homes, our offices. So again, there's going to be lots of businesses, lots of industry, lots of opportunities cropping up around there. New businesses in their entirety. Seaweed farms is one I was reading about recently. So seaweed and seagrasses generally are really good at sequestering carbon. 80% of the world's carbon emissions apparently are sequestered within plants and vegetation in water. So some clever folk will start creating seaweed farms. They'll be creating carbon credits, which they'll sell into the market. There's going to be business opportunities in low carbon materials. Again, I was reading about roof tiles that can purify the air. Smog eating buildings, buildings with a sort of new cladding that can absorb toxic air pollution. So some really exciting stuff there. Question about the UN Sustainable Goals. Yeah, we're seeing again more and more clients signing up to those, and Gowling as well. We've signed up to them as well. So it's a really, and some very powerful objectives within them, which require businesses to take really positive steps to improve the environment. And I guess it's more of an ESG sort of type principles as well, but some very powerful stuff in there about environment and resources and so forth, which sends a very clear message to stakeholders, to employees, customers, all that kind of stuff about how businesses are going to behave. I expect, again, after COP26, there will be greater interest in that. More and more businesses wanting to sign up and make these public commitments that they're not just going to do what they think is a good thing, they're going to do some more objective, hit some more objective goals as well.
I mean, that's very, very interesting. I think a question that's come up is that perhaps some of the actions are currently inconsistent with that. The particular issues come up in relation to West Cumbria Mining, which is a new coal mining organisation permitted by the Secretary of State. How does that fit? Is that an aberration, or is it a short-term thing, or is there some justification for that that you're aware of? I'm conscious it's a specific issue, but
yeah, I mean, speaking. Okay, so my more measured response is to say that certain industries still need coke and what have you. So the steel industry still needs that. So I think that's the justification for it. Speaking as an environmentalist, I don't think you can, in the one hand, be standing up in Glasgow saying no more coal-fired power stations across the world. China last week or the week before saying we're not going to finance coal-fired power stations in other countries, which has a really positive impact for the climate in terms of Indonesia and so forth, Southeast Asia. And then to be permitting anything to do with coal in the UK, I think is baffling. Whether that project ultimately goes, I don't know enough about it, but my sense is that public opinion is just so strongly against it. It's a bit like fracking, that the UK government or previous governments have said, yeah, go, fracking, we'll look into it. and the good folk of Surrey and affected communities, laid down on the road and stopped it. So would that project go ahead? I just can't begin to imagine it will.
Okay, so I think you're beginning to see how it plays into individual businesses a bit, and the opportunities that might be out there. Also, the risk management point of view, from compliance point of view, and the sort of customer pressure that businesses might come under if they're not green. But what's the role of in-house lawyers in all of this? Why do they need to worry about it?
Yeah, so I guess any day now, fingers crossed, we're going to get that COP26 media cycle is going to start to begin. We're going to get a lot of government announcements, a lot of publicity about some new green initiatives, and environment's going to be on the front page of the press for good reasons, not just because of Insulation UK trying to bring havoc to them 25. So I think there's been positive stories, and I think businesses are probably going to start to feel a lot of pressure to talk about their own environmental performance, not just during COP but afterwards. So I think the green dial is going to move quite significantly in the coming months, and businesses need to be able to talk about the impacts that they have on the environment. So not just the sort of the usual stuff about how much power you're using, where you get your light bulbs from, what kind of paper you're using, but what other resources you're using. How much water are you using? How much palm oil is in your supply chain if you're in food and drink? How many electric vehicles have you got in your fleet? What are you doing about rare earth minerals? All that kind of stuff. So that's you've got to be able to talk confidently about the impacts you have on the environment. But increasingly you need to be able to talk about the impacts that climate change has for your business. Where do you do business? Which of your manufacturing plants are vulnerable to flooding? How are you reducing the effects of storms on your operations? And then thirdly, and again, my hobby horse, what are you doing to make the planet better? What are you rewilding? Are you improving biodiversity? So some businesses are going to start making some pretty silly and rash claims. Announce now, work out the detail later. We're going to do net zero by next week or whatever. Obviously, most of our clients, all of our clients, will be much more considered than that. But in-house lawyers, they're kind of at the heart, I think, of promises which are made publicly by businesses. They manage risk, and climate change, let's not be in any doubt, is a huge risk. But it's the opportunity as well. But I think in-house lawyers, they we can talk about some sort of practical type stuff in a minute. But they need to understand obviously how climate change affects their business and how their business impacts the environment, and that takes all the in-house lawyers need to be able to know how, and like a watchdog, they need to know how to share that information with the outside community. For some of our large clients, reporting is beginning to become mandatory. For others, it's voluntary. But no doubt that's going to proliferate. Your environmental statements are really, really critical, and NGOs are going to read them. They're going to hold your feet to the fire, and if you're saying the wrong things, i.e., you're not ticking those regulatory boxes in terms of reporting, there's going to be all sorts of problems. If you're saying too much, the problems are just as big. It's just at the different ends of the scale. There will be climate change litigation stemming from your disclosures. So shareholders, activists, NGOs increasingly have more and more standing. The courts have been quite liberal in this respect, and they're going to ensure that you are not just meeting regulation, but you're exceeding it for certain businesses. So I think finally the role of the GC or the in-house lawyer, in-house lawyers are excellent at bringing together all those different strands of the business, aren't they? So they pull the sales team in, the finance, the HR. They've kind of got fingers in each pie, and I think that's going to be critical if you're going to be credible as a business in talking about your environmental performance.
I've got a specific question here around TCFD and whether you think that kind of reporting will become mandatory.
Yes, it will. Mark Carney has been, beating that drum quite loudly for a while. I think it's not just going to be in relation to, the climate impacts, financial disclosure in relation to climate. I think there's going to be nature-based reporting as well. So that's quite exciting. They will, I guess, effectively become the gold standard, and we're already seeing financial regulators getting behind that. And the idea of the standardized reporting or reporting generally is to give this sort of this equal baselines of giving proper information to investors and those wanting to do business with the businesses reporting. So it's about consistent disclosure, enabling you to compare, I guess, apples and pears. So yeah, I think that's likely to increase, and it's great because it's effectively a global standard, because you see, so for example in the UK we have streamlined energy and climate carbon reporting, SECR. Doesn't apply to everyone. It's quite prescriptive, but it's our jurisdiction only. So multinational isn't having to report on the same things elsewhere. So having some sort of consistent global reporting is going to be really good.
So just down to some practical matters, what do you think in-house lawyers should be doing now about COP and about climate issues?
Yeah, so let's so probably a list here. If we start auditing, and again, apologies if teaching grammar is tough eggs, but it's about understanding your baseline. What does today look like? Getting evidence, being really thorough in those auditing, and looking down your supply chain, because it's very easy with a supply chain to be pushing your environmental impacts to other countries, right? So if your supply chain is overseas, then that's where the water resource issues are. That's where the carbon emissions are. So the NGOs and the environmentalists are very alive to that. So look at your supply chain really closely. As I said a minute ago, look at your resources really closely as well. So not just paper and power, that's a given, but how much water do you need? What are the options for air cooling to water cooling, for example? That kind of stuff. Just are you offsetting your carbon emissions, or are you genuinely trying to reduce them? Because it's dead easy to write a check for a few £1,000s to say that's carbon emissions sorted out, but actually it's not good enough. You need to look at how you can properly reduce it. Again, on auditing, look at your environmental management systems. Are they robust? Are they internationally recognized as being reliable, fundable, legitimate? Do they give you the data that you need to look your stakeholders in the eye and tell them that your data is accurate? So I think that's sort of auditing, and I can't sort of stress how critical that is. In terms of disclosure, think about how you're communicating your environmental story to employees, to investors, lenders, customers. Again, what do your grads think about it? Because they're going to tell you the truth. Are you reporting on a mandatory basis? There is a real proliferation about reporting. We've got new laws coming in relation to rainforest commodities. So if you are a big business and you are using palm oil, you're using beef, you're using leather, rubber, cocoa, any of the crops that are traditionally grown where rainforest is chopped down, there are new requirements on big businesses to go out there and really do proper due diligence and work out, am I using those rainforest commodities? Where are they coming from? Are they properly sustainable? If they're not, what are you going to do about it? And again, it starts at the top, but soon everyone's doing it on a voluntary basis, and then we start to move to something else. So the more information you can get about your operations, the better. If you are not reporting, obviously there's there are obviously legal consequences for that. But the bigger issue, I think, is probably going to be, what are people saying about you for not properly disclosing? So that's sort of auditing, that's disclosure. Working with your peers, what are your competitors doing? Is there an industry approach or an industry standard emerging? How can you shape that with your peers and your competitors? And I guess the other big one is around internal education. Are you educating your board on environmental issues, on ESG matters? Do they know how to speak credibly on these issues? Can Can they articulate the policies? Do they have the detail? If your leadership team, your CEO has been making announcements about the environment, what was said, how, who's owning internally the responsibility for checking that those targets are being met, that they are achievable. Obviously, if nothing's been said, on environment, why not make sure something is announced soon? Are you looking, and are you making sure your colleagues are aware of the green finance products? It's going to really kick off after COP26. It's already quite green finance products are already coming to the fore, and often there's cheaper finance available. If you are going to use those funds for environmental purposes or using the sustainable materials in your development and so forth. Again, in-house lawyers need to be really aware of greenwashing. So, those pesky sales folk are going to say what they need to do, wherever they think they can in order to market that product as a green product. They're going to badge stuff as sustainable. They're going to badge it as low carbon, butterfly friendly, whatever they need to say to put that sticker on the product, they're going to think about. So again, you're the regulator there internally. Make sure that all those green commitments that you're making as a business are legitimate, because again, we're seeing regulators companies take businesses to task for being a little bit too bold in some of their claims. And then finally, where are the improvements that can be made? What are the easy wins? It's human nature to worry about risks, and most of us are lawyers on this call, so we're prone to worrying. But yeah, there's an opportunity there. So who's looking at that within your business? Are the low-hanging fruits being taken?
We're at the end of the formal part of the webinar. I've got 3 questions I'd like to put to you for those of you who feel able to stay on for a bit longer, and I hope that will be most of you. I think the first question relates to actually coming from a government lawyer who acknowledges obviously that the government has got procurement obligations under social value requirements for procurement, and up to 10% or at least 10% or more needs to go towards a social value objective, of course. And fighting climate change is one of, I think, potentially 7 objectives that the government can set to reach. So we could see government setting climate change objectives in terms of scoring and evaluation as part of the procurement process. Do you think that in-house lawyers in private practice would have an opportunity to leverage a similar approach?
How do you mean?
Requiring their procurement policy to set down strong environmental standards, such as PAS 2060 accreditation or something.
Yeah, I mean, we're certainly seeing as a business greater interest in what we're doing as a business on the environment. So we're seeing the scores given for our own environmental performance, much more to be scored more highly. And certainly as a business, we are procuring in greener ways as well, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because clients are demanding it as well, and supply chain. So undoubtedly there is scope for improvements. And I think was the question about whether well,
I think the question was the extent to which I think you might see private sector organizations off the back of legal advice or with in-house lawyer support setting out rules for procurement of services or equipment which set as entry criteria effectively climate standards.
No, undoubtedly, and I think, sorry, I thought the question was moving in a slightly different place, which I think is also true. That do lawyers in public sector have an ability to influence debate? Because we do focus on business and what have you, but actually it is the public sector which is, as far as I can be, making slightly more vocal, more loud,
absolutely, yeah,
about environment. And so where they go, our commercial clients will follow. So apologies if I've sort of focused on the commercial sector, but actually it's the in-house lawyers in the public sector which I guess can make even greater contribution to this debate and hold the green gun to you and me, Michael, and private practice and make us do more when that spills over.
Yeah, I think for me, as a lawyer that gets versed in public law issues quite a bit, one of the challenges is that there are seven all equally important social value objectives under the public procurement notice, and there's a degree of flexibility in choosing which one gets priority on an individual project. So I think an interesting discussion in the public sector space is the priorities between those social value objectives, all of which are important and all of which, as suppliers to the government, we ought to be measuring ourselves up towards. The next question is, I think you referenced the 2019 Environment Bill. What do you think is the UK government's appetite to legislate at the moment, especially post COP? Are we going to wait and see, or are we going to be charging in on our white horse again?
Well, first thing is to get the Environment Bill to get royal assent. It was announced in 2018, introduced in 2019. It's taken I was going to say ridiculous, that's unfair. It's taken a very long time to get through for something as important. And it's had broad support from both sides. Actually, maybe the House of Lords has held the government's feet to the fire a little bit more than we expected, which is great. So clearly we've got to get that one done first before we start thinking about other stuff. It's a bit of a framework legislation. So from that bill, from that act, we will have dozens of regulations, the big one being around biodiversity net gain. I think if that's a success, I think the government might have more confidence to say, look, instead of 10%, it's going to be 15, it's going to be 20. You know, we've got clients already who are saying we're going to go harder than 10% because it's going to be a great selling point for us. And it's the right thing to do. And it's a good thing to put in our annual report, which we like. So do I think there's going to be greater appetite for legislation? I really hope so. It would be nice to be able to sort of think about the future rather than dealing with referendum decisions and fuel crises and pandemic and stuff like that. But for too long, the environment's been the second most important thing to worry about. I think public opinion isn't quite ready for it yet. You know, we've seen with the Insulation UK protests that people aren't ready to be told they need to insulate their homes. They just want to get to work on time. They want to get to Heathrow Airport. So there's got to be an appetite for consumers and for the general public to really change their ways. It's well on the way. I don't think we are quite ready as a community to do that too soon. I think it's going to be those sort of baby steps to get there.
Thank you, Ben. And final question this is from Matt. Do you think the necessary interventions are already there to hit targets, and that we should just properly invest in them and deliver them, or do we need something completely new, or some blue sky research needed to make all the difference?
It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because I think the UK is actually pretty well ahead of the game. I think we genuinely can say we're a green leader. We've got some great policy measures already. We're going great guns on our carbon emissions because we've got so much ability to put big offshore wind turbines in the sea. So we're a world leader there. We get a third of our power from that. So it's we're quite lucky in the UK, I think, that we can do some of that stuff. So we've made big leaps forward. So do I think the UK is going to hit its targets and what have you? Yeah, I think we will actually. I think it's good. If the question were UK specific, do we need to do more? There's always scope for more, but actually I think we're in a good place. If it's a global question, then I do worry that we aren't going to hit those targets. It was frightening to read that the UN thinks we could be as high as 3 degrees, and 2 degrees is horrendous. 1.5 is bad. 3 degrees is off the scale. Scary. So I do hope there's more interventions. I hope this COP26 is progressive and has efficient within it. And I kind of feel, you know, the next big COP in 2026 in 5 years' time. Maybe they'll try and get back on track and do it in 4 years. There's 2025 is the next big one. It's a bit late then if we haven't hit those targets. So I kind of hope, I suppose, that we keep things under a bit more regular review. I don't like this 5-yearly cycle. I think it's 2 years. Keep things under more regular observations.
Okay, Ben, well, thank you. It's been a really fascinating discussion with you, and I think you've both scared and encouraged us in equal measure. So it just remains for me to say a big thank you to all the audience today for listening in, and I hope you found it interesting. Please remember to you can download this webinar if you want to share it, and please fill in the feedback form. And a big thank you to Ben for your excellent presentation and for being so passionate in yourself and on our behalf, actually, on about a topic of such importance. And goodbye, everyone.